Guys, it's Miss Simpson and it's time for reading today. Guess what? We finished How to Steal a Dog last Friday, and today we are starting my favorite book ever that I ever read to my students. Now, guess what? I read books all the time. We have read a total of 3 books already together this year. We read Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. We read Frindle. We just finished How to Steal a Dog, and this will be the last novel, I think, unless we finish early. This will be the last novel that we do together. I actually just bought my very own copy of the whole entire set of this novel because that's how much I like it. I have been reading this. I've been teaching for 3 years. You guys are my 3rd year. And I have been reading this book every single year to my students. And I do that because when I was in school, I was read this book and I absolutely loved it. So before I show you what it was, I want to talk to you about How to Steal a Dog real quick. So How to Steal a Dog, it was realistic fiction. That means that it could have happened, but it didn't. It was real life. The characters were real people. The dog didn't talk. The characters, it could have happened. There could have been a little girl that went and stole a dog, and all of that could have happened, but it didn't really happen in real life. That's why it's realistic, because it seems real, but it's fiction, which means it's not. The book I'm about to read to you is called Gregor the Overlander, and it is a fantasy book. So what fantasy means is it's still fiction. It's still fake. But fantasy is when the characters in the book some of them are fictional characters that cannot be alive in real life. So like, for example, you'll see soon we'll have some mice in there that are very large, and I can't remember. I haven't read it in a year, so I don't really remember what happens, but I know that a lot of them, there's cockroaches in the book, and they have their own language. Now, maybe cockroaches have their own language, but the cockroaches in the book are like gigantic, which is not real in real life. Like, they're so big you can ride on their back. There are things in this book that could never have happened in real life. And you'll figure that out. The more we get into it and the more we'll read, you'll be like, oh, yeah, that is fantasy. That could never happen in real life. So books that are realistic fiction is like Wonder. If you've ever seen the movie or read the book Wonder, that is a realistic fiction book. If you've ever read Enemy Pie, the picture book, that is realistic fiction. That could have happened. Those shoes, that's realistic fiction, could have happened. Books that are more of a fantasy are Hunger Games. That is an older book, and it's written by the same author, which is really cool. Suzanne Collins, she also wrote The Hunger Games, which is another one of my favorite books. It's a little bit older. You guys probably haven't read it yet, but when you do get there, it's a great book, and I do think you should read it. When you get in maybe 6th grade, junior high, it's a really, really, really good book. And this is the same author that wrote that. But that is also fantasy. If you've ever read or heard of Harry Potter, that is also a fantasy book. So I'm just giving you some examples to help you realize kind of what this book is going to be like. So I don't know if you've ever seen this, but on the back of a book, I call it the back blurb. It's a little blurb of what is going to happen in the book. It gives you a little preview. It is always good to read these back blurbs because let me tell you, this is how you know if you want to read a book or not. Miss Townsley is a 4th grade teacher here in the school, and she recommended a book to me that I have just started reading, and I was really nervous to read it because I didn't think I was going to like it. But I read the back blurb, and I was like, ooh, I think I'm going to like that. So I actually did read it, and so far it's a really good book. So let's read our back blurb and see what this book is going to be about. When 11-year-old Gregor follows his little sister through a grate in the laundry room of his New York City apartment building, he hurtles into the dark underland beneath the city. There, humans live uneasily beside giant spiders, bats, cockroaches, and rats. Gregor just wants to find his way home, but then he discovers that a prophecy foretells a role for him in the Underland's future. He must go on a quest that will change him and the Underland forever. So this is actually a series book. So How to Steal a Dog is just one book by itself. There's no books that go with it. A book that comes in a series means that there are multiple books that go with it, and I bought them all. So we have book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, and book 5. So they are out of order, number 1. So there are 5 books in this series. So that means that the story from book 1 carries on to book 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's the same people, same characters, and they continue the plot of the story throughout 5 books. Same with Harry Potter. There are 7 books, I believe. I just finished reading them, so I should know. But I have about 7 Harry Potter books, and they carry the story throughout the whole book. Or the Hunger Games. There are 3 Hunger Games books, and that story is carried through the whole entire book. So we are actually going to read together chapter 1. I want you right now to just pause the video real quick, and just by the front cover, what do you think is going to happen? I want you to make a prediction on what you think is going to happen in this book. So again, pause the video. All right, I am not going to make a prediction because I know what happens. I haven't read it in a while, so I don't know every detail, but I don't want to give anything away. So let's go ahead and let's start reading chapter 1. Chapter 1 for my mom and dad, The Fall. Gregor had pressed his forehead against the screen for so long he could feel a pattern of tiny checks above his eyebrows. He ran his fingers over the bumps and resisted the impulse to let out a primal caveman scream. It was building up in his chest, that long, guttural howl reserved for real emergencies, like when you ran into a saber-toothed tiger without your club, or your fire went out during the Ice Age. He even went so far as to open his mouth and take a deep breath before he banged his head back into the screen with a quiet sound of frustration. Ugh. What was the point anyway? It wouldn't change one thing. Not the heat, not the boredom, not the endless space of summer laid out before him. He considered waking up Boots, his 2-year-old sister, just for a little distraction, but he let her sleep. At least she was cool in the air-conditioned bedroom she shared with their 7-year-old sister Lizzie and their grandma. It was the only air-conditioned room in the apartment. On really hot nights, Gregor and his mother could spread quilts on the floor to sleep, but with 5 in the room, it wasn't cool, just lukewarm. Gregor got an ice cube from the freezer and rubbed it on his face. He stared out at the courtyard where a stray dog sniffed around an overflowing trash can. The dog set its paws on the rim, tipping the can and sending the garbage across the sidewalk. Gregor caught a glimpse of a couple of shadowy shapes scurrying along the wall and grimaced. Rats. He never really got used to them. Otherwise, the courtyard was deserted. Usually it was full of kids playing ball, jumping rope, or swinging around the creaky jungle gym. But this morning, the bus had left for camp, and every kid between the ages of 4 and 14 had been on it, except one. "I'm sorry, baby, you can't go," his mother had told him a few weeks ago. And she really had been sorry, too. He could tell by the look on her face. "Someone has to watch Boots while I'm at work, and we both know your grandma can't handle it anymore." Of course he knew it. For the last year, his grandma had been slipping in and out of reality. One minute she was clear as a bell, and the next she was calling him Simon. Who was Simon? He had no idea. It would have been different a few years ago. His mom worked only part-time then, and his dad, who taught high school science, was off on summers. He'd have taken care of Boots, but since his dad disappeared one night, Gregor's role in the family changed. He was the oldest, so he'd picked up a lot of the slack. Looking after his little sisters was a big part of it. So all Gregor had said was, "That's okay, Mom. Camp's for kids anyway." He'd shrugged to know. At 11, he was past caring about things like camp, but somehow that had made her look sadder. "Do you want Lizzie to stay home with you, give you some company?" she'd asked. A look of panic had crossed Lizzie's face at the suggestion. She probably would have burst into tears if Gregor hadn't refused the offer. "Nah, let her go. I'll be fine with Boots." So here he was, not fine spending the whole summer cooped up with a 2-year-old and his grandma who thought he was someone named Simon. He heard his grandma call from the bedroom. Gregor shook his head and he couldn't help smiling a little. "Coming, Grandma," he called back and crunched down the rest of his ice cube. A golden glow filled the room as the afternoon sunlight tried to force its way through the shades. His grandma lay on the bed, covered by a thin cotton quilt. Every patch on the quilt had come from a dress she'd made for herself through the years. In her more lucid moments, she talked to Gregor through the quilt. "This polka-dotted Swiss I wore to my cousin Lucy's graduation when I was 11. This lemon yellow was a Sunday dress, and this white is in actual fact a corner of my wedding dress. I do not lie." This, however, was not a lucid moment. Simon, she said, her face showing relief at the sight of him. I thought you forgot your lunch pail. You'll get hungry plowing. His grandma had been raised on a farm in Virginia and had come to New York when she married his grandfather. She had never really taken to it. Sometimes Gregor was secretly glad that he could return to that farm in her mind, and a little envious. It wasn't any fun sitting around their apartment all the time, but now the bus would probably be arriving at camp, and Lizzie and the rest of the kids would. Gecko! Squeaked a little voice. A curly head popped over the side of the crib. Me out! Boots stuck the soggy end of a stuffed dog's tail in her mouth and reached up both arms to him. Gregor lifted his sister high in the air and blew a loud raspberry on her stomach. She giggled and the dog fell to the floor. He set her down to retrieve it. Take your hat, said Grandma, still somewhere back in Virginia. Gregor took her hand to try to focus her attention. You want a cold drink, Grandma? How about a root beer? She laughed. A root beer? What is it, my birthday? How did you answer something like that? Gregor gave her hand a squeeze and scooped up Boots. I'll be right back, he said loudly. His grandma was still laughing to herself. A root beer, she said and wiped her eyes. In the kitchen, Gregor filled a glass with icy root beer and made Boots a bottle of milk. Cold, she beamed, pressing it to her face. Yes, nice and cold, Boots, said Gregor. A knock on the door startled him. The people had been used for a good 40 years, had been useless for a good 40 years. He called through the door. Who is it? It's Mrs. Cormachi, darling. I told your mother I'd sit with your grandma at 4, a voice called out. Then Gregor remembered the pile of laundry he was supposed to do. At least he'd get out of the apartment. He opened the door to find Mrs. Cormachi looking wilted in the heat. Hello, you. Isn't it awful? I tell you, I do not suffer the heat gladly. She bustled into the apartment, patting her face with an old bandana. Oh, you dream, is that for me? She said, and before he could answer, she was gulping down the root beer like she'd been lost in the desert. Sure, Gregor mumbled, heading back to the kitchen to fix another. He didn't really mind Mrs. Cormachi today, and today it was almost a relief to see her. Great, day 1, and I'm looking forward to a trip to the laundry room, Gregor thought. By September, I'll probably be ecstatic when we get the phone bill. Mrs. Cormachi held out her glass for a refill. So when are you going to let me read your tarot, mister? You know I've got the gift, she said. Mrs. Cormachi posted signs by the mailboxes offering to read tarot cards for people at $10 a shot. No charge for you, she always told Gregor. He never accepted because he had a sneaking suspicion Mrs. Cormachi would end up asking a lot more questions than he would. Questions he couldn't answer. Questions about his dad. He mumbled something about the laundry and hurried off to collect it. Knowing Mrs. Cormachi, she probably had a deck of tarot cards right in her pocket. Down in the laundry room, Gregor sorted clothes as best he could. Whites, darks, colors. What was he supposed to do with Boots' black and white striped shorts? He tossed them in the darks, feeling sure it was the wrong decision. Most of their clothes were kind of grayish anyway, from age, not bad laundry choices. All Gregor's shorts were just his winter pants cut off at the knees, and he only had a few t-shirts that fit from last year. But what did it matter if he was going to be locked in the apartment all summer? Ball! Cried Boots in distress. Ball! Gregor reached his arm between the dryers and pulled out an old tennis ball Boots had been chasing around. He picked off the dryer lint and tossed it across the room. Boots ran after it like a puppy. What a mess, thought Gregor, laughing a little. What a sticky, crusty, dusty mess. The remains of her lunch, egg salad and chocolate pudding, were still evident on Boots' face and shirt. She colored her hands purples with washable markers that Gregor thought maybe a sandblaster could remove, and her diaper sagged down around her knees. It was just too hot to put her into shorts. Boots ran back to him with the ball, dryer lint floating in her curls. Her sweaty face beamed as she held out the ball. What makes you so happy, Boots? He asked. Ball! She said, and then banged her head into his knee, on purpose, to speed him up. Gregor tossed the ball down the alley between the washers and the dryers, and Boots flew after it. As the game continued, Gregor tried to remember the last time he felt as happy as Boots did with her ball. He had had some decent times over the past couple of years. The city middle school band had gotten to play at Carnegie Hall. That was pretty cool. He even had a short solo on a saxophone. Things were always better when he played music. The notes seemed to carry him to a different world altogether. Running track was good too, pushing his body on and on until everything had been drummed out of his mind. But if he was honest with himself, Gregor knew it had been years since he felt real happiness. Exactly 2 years, 7 months, and 13 days, he thought. He didn't try to count, but the numbers automatically tallied up in his head. He had some inner calculator that always knew exactly how long his dad had been gone. Boots could be happy. She wasn't even born when it happened. Lizzie was only 4, but Gregor had been 8 and had missed nothing. Like the frantic calls to the police, who acted almost bored with the fact that his dad had vanished into thin air. Clearly, they thought he'd run off. They even implied it was another woman. That just wasn't true. If there was anything Gregor knew, it was that his father loved his mother, and he loved him and Lizzie, and that he would have loved Boots. But then, how could he have loved them without a word? I know this is a long chapter, but we're almost done. Gregor couldn't believe his dad would abandon the family and never look back. Accept it, he whispered to himself. He's dead. A wave of pain swept through him. It wasn't true. It couldn't be true. His dad was coming back because what? Because he wanted it so badly it must be true? Because they needed him? No, thought Gregor. It's because I can feel it. I know he's coming back. The washer spun to a stop, and Gregor piled the clothes into a couple of dryers. And when he gets back, he better have a really good explanation for where he's been, muttered Gregor as he slammed the dryer door shut, like he got bumped on the head and forgot who he was, or he was kidnapped by aliens. Lots of people got kidnapped by aliens on TV. Maybe it could happen. He thought about different possibilities a lot in his head, but they rarely mentioned his dad at home. There was an unspoken agreement that his dad would return. All the neighbors thought he'd just taken off. The adults never mentioned it, and neither did most of the kids. About half of them only lived with one parent anyway. Strangers sometimes asked, though. After about a year of trying to explain it, Gregor came up with a story that his parents were divorced and his dad lived in California. It was a lie, but people believed it, while no one seemed to believe the truth, whatever that was. And after he gets home, I can take him, Gregor said aloud and then stopped himself. He was about to break the rule. The rule was that he couldn't think about things that would happen after his dad got back. And since his dad could come back at any moment, Gregor didn't allow himself to think about the future at all. He had this weird feeling that if he imagined actual events like having his dad back next Christmas or his dad helping to coach the track team, they would never happen. Besides, as happy as some daydream would make him, it only made returning to reality more painful. So that was the rule. Gregor had to keep his mind in the present and leave the future to itself. He realized that this system wasn't great, but it was the best way he figured out to get through a day. Gregor noticed that Boots had been suspiciously quiet. He looked around and felt alarmed when he couldn't spot her right away. Then he saw a scuffed pink sandal poking out from the last dryer. "Boots, get out of there," said Gregor. You had to watch her around electrical stuff. She loved plugs. As he hurried across the laundry room, Gregor heard a metallic clunk and then a giggle from Boots. Great, now she's dismantling the dryer, thought Gregor. Picking up speed as he reached for the wall, a strange scene confronted him. The metal grate to an old air duct was wide open, secured by 2 rusty hinges at the top. Boots was squinting into the opening, about 2 feet by 2 feet, which led into the wall of the building. From where he stood, Gregor could see nothing but blackness. Then a wisp of, what was it? Steam? Smoke? It didn't really look like either. Some strange vapor drifted out of the hole and curled up around Boots. She held out her arms curiously and she leaned forward. "No!" yelled Gregor as he lunged out for her, but Boots' tiny frame seemed to be sucked into the air duct. Without thinking, Gregor thrust his head and shoulders into the hole. The metal grate smacked into his back, and the next thing he knew, he was falling down, down, down into empty space. And that's the end of chapter 1. I know it's a rough place to end, and in my opinion, the reason it's a rough place to end is because it's a cliffhanger. That's when you get stuck on the edge and you just want to keep reading, but you can't. All right, so for your assignment today, it's pretty easy. You're going to do a before reading page. It's just 4 questions. It looks like a lot, but you don't have to fill up the whole entire thing. The only thing I ask of you is that you write incomplete sentences. So the title of the book, which is Gregor the Overlander, the author is Suzanne Collins. Have you read anything by this author before? So have you read The Hunger Games? Have you read anything? Maybe Google Suzanne Collins and see if you've read any of those books. Then, look at the front cover. What hints do you think it gives about the story? Well, we already paused and made predictions. So pause again and make some more predictions. Read the back cover, the back blurb we already did. And what did you learn about the story from the back cover? Well, I'm going to put it right here just in case you want to pause the video and read it again. So tell me about the back cover. And then based on both of those, tell me, do you want to read this book? Do you think it's going to be a good book? Why or why not? So just based off what you have seen so far, tell me if you want to actually read this book. Now, regardless, we're going to read it because I promise you by chapter 5, you're going to be hooked. All right, guys, I love y'all so much. Have a great day.